The veteran thought the world had forgotten him, invisible, alone, carrying stories no one wanted to hear, until a young Marine saw the tattoo on his arm and froze. In that moment, the past stopped being silent, and something deep rose to the surface, changing everything around them. It was just another cold Saturday morning in northeastern Ohio, and the smell of burnt coffee and fried eggs filled the small roadside diner off Route 22. Walter Madsen, 78, had claimed the corner. Booth near the window, same as every week. A worn-out cap marked Vietnam Vet sat on the table untouched. He didn't wear it anymore. Not because he wasn't proud, but because fewer people cared now. Most didn't even glance his way. He stared out the window, watching the frost creep along the glass, lost in memories that had blurred into dreams. The tattoo on his forearm, faded, almost ghost-like, was barely visible under his jacket sleeve, but it had never left him, not in 50 years. Then the bell above the diner door jingled. A gust of cold air swept in, followed by a tall, broad-shouldered young man in uniform. The Marine's eyes scanned the room casually until they landed on Walter's arm. His entire body stiffened. He didn't blink, he didn't breathe, and as he stepped closer, something unspoken passed between them, like a wire pulled taut. Between generations, humming with a truth too long buried, Alex Ferris hadn't meant to stop. He'd been driving back to Camp Lejeune after a long weekend with his mother in Pittsburgh. A snow squall hit harder than expected, and his phone's GPS rerouted him through a stretch of country highway he didn't recognize. The diner had looked like a warm spot to wait out the worst of it. Neon open sign flickering, windows fogged up from the inside. He didn't even notice the man at first, just ordered black coffee and sat at the counter, rubbing his hands to shake off the cold. Then he glanced over his shoulder, and that's when he saw it. The tattoo, not your standard marine ink or patriotic eagle. It was something different, something rare. A trident inside a circle, flanked by coordinates and a string of numbers almost like a date. His heart skipped. He stood up too fast, nearly knocking over his coffee. The waitress gave him a look, but he barely noticed. Alex walked slowly toward the booth. The old man didn't move, didn't even look up. He just sipped his coffee, eyes locked on something far away. "Excuse me, sir," Alex said, voice tight. "That tattoo on your arm, where did you get it?" Walter finally turned his head. His eyes, pale and cloudy but still sharp, met Alex's with a kind of tired recognition. Not of the man, but of the moment. "I got it in a place no one ever talks about," Walter said quietly. "Most don't even believe it happened." Alex's throat tightened. He pulled something from his wallet, a photo creased and faded. He held it out. "My grandfather had the same tattoo. Said it was from a mission he couldn't talk about. Operation Grey Ember. He never came back." Walter took the photo, his hand trembling slightly. He looked at it, then at Alex, and something inside him, locked up for half a century, began to stir. "I was there," he said. "I knew your grandfather." And just like that, the silence cracked open. They sat together at the corner booth, the silence between them now thick with meaning. Outside, snowflakes tapped against the glass like curious fingers. Inside, the warmth of the diner was at odds with the cold truths beginning to surface. Walter's voice was slow, measured. Years of silence had made his words careful, like stepping across a frozen lake. "Operation Grey Ember," he said almost to himself. "That name was erased from records. They told us we'd never speak of it again. Not to family, not to anyone." Alex leaned in, his coffee forgotten. "My grandfather's name was Harold Ferris. He never told my mom much, just that he had a brotherhood that was broken. After he disappeared, all we had was a trunk of things. No one could explain." Walter blinked. "Harold Ferris." His jaw tightened. "We called him Red because of his hair. Smart as hell, braver than most." Alex's shoulders dropped. a small exhale escaping like he'd been holding it for years. No one believed me when I said something about his service didn't add up. They said he was just another MIA, but I found letters, maps, symbols. My mom never knew what to do with them. I kept them in a shoebox. Walter looked away, his eyes misting. Red saved my life. We were ambushed outside Lao Bao. I took a bullet in the leg. Red dragged me back under fire, but the next morning he was gone. They said he deserted, but that's a damn lie. Alex's hands clenched. Then what happened to him? Walter hesitated, staring down at the old photo. That mission wasn't just covert, it was off the books. We weren't supposed to come back, and some of us didn't, not because of the enemy, but because of our own command. The words hung there like a slow-building storm. Alex swallowed hard. I have the letters with me, in the car. Walter looked up, something sharp flickering behind his eyes. Bring them. As Alex rushed outside to grab the box, Walter remained still, but inside something long dead had started to breathe again. The past wasn't just calling, it was kicking down the door. Alex placed the weathered shoebox on the diner table like it was made of glass. The cardboard was stained and the tape barely held. Walter reached for it with quiet reverence, as though he already knew what was inside would hurt, but also heal. Inside were scraps of another life, envelopes yellowed with age, pages torn at the edges, a compass missing its needle, and a leather-bound notebook. But what caught Walter's eye was a photograph. Not the one Alex had shown him earlier. This one was different. It was a group shot. 4 men in fatigues crouched in front of a chopper under jungle canopy. Walter pointed. That's Red. That's me, and those 2... His voice dropped. That's Harmon and Diaz. Alex looked at him. You remember all of them? Every damn one, Walter said. We were all that stood between each other and death. He unfolded one of the letters, skimming until he reached the end. Then his breath caught. At the bottom of the page was a set of numbers, written hastily. This isn't just a sign-off, Walter said, voice low. It's a cipher. Red used to create simple codes for us, to pass messages without raising flags. This isn't random, Alex leaned in. Can you break it? Walter opened the notebook and flipped to a dog-eared page filled with jumbled scribbles. I think so. If I'm right, this was his way of saying something went wrong, that he needed help. They worked silently, decoding one letter at a time, word by word. Finally, the message took shape. They found out. I'm being moved. If you get this, don't trust command. Follow the signal, Montana. Walter sat back, his face pale. Montana, he repeated. That's where Harmon disappeared after the mission. We called him the ghost of the barracks. Nobody saw him after 74. Alex's eyes narrowed. Then that's where we need to go. For the first time in decades, Walter felt purpose surge through him. Not anger, not regret, direction. But just as he reached for the final letter, in the box, his fingers froze. At the bottom of the envelope was something he hadn't expected to see. A dog tag with a name filed off, but the serial number still intact. It wasn't Red's. The road to Montana stretched like a ribbon through the frozen Midwest, winding through quiet towns and endless plains dusted in snow. Walter hadn't driven this far in years, but Alex insisted on taking the wheel. I've got the stamina, he'd said, and Walter hadn't argued. Truth be told, a part of him was afraid of what they might find. They rode mostly in silence, broken occasionally by the crackle of a classic rock station, or Alex asking something small like how to properly fold a flag. But as the miles passed, so did the silence between them. Walter spoke more freely now, about Red's laughter, about the dense heat of jungle nights, about the moments that blurred life and death into one long heartbeat. Joe Harmon, Walter finally said as the mountains began to rise in the distance. He was our sergeant, stoic, didn't trust brass, said the war was run by ghosts with pens. After Ember fell apart, he disappeared. Rumor was he built a cabin somewhere upstate. And lived off-grid. Never answered letters. Some said he went crazy. Alex looked over. You think he'll talk to us? I don't know, Walter said. But he was the one man who saw what I saw. What they did to Red. They reached the last gas station. Before the climb into the hills, a grizzled trucker leaned against the pump, eyeing Walter's tattoo as they filled up. You're one of them, the man muttered, squinting. From Ember, Walter stiffened. And you are? The man tapped. His chest. Korea. But I've heard the stories. My buddy in Virginia said a group came back mangled, not from combat, but from what they saw. Said you all got buried alive, paperwork and all. Alex stepped forward. Do you know anyone named Joe Harmon? The trucker nodded slowly. Lives past Wolf Creek. Doesn't see visitors. But if you're really from Ember, he might make an exception. Walter watched the man drive off, gravel crunching under heavy tires. For a moment he said nothing, then, we're not just chasing memories anymore. And with that, they headed into the snow-covered hills, where a ghost waited in silence. The road narrowed as they climbed into the Montana hills, trees closing in like silent witnesses to secrets long buried. Walter's breath fogged up the window, his eyes scanning the snow-covered landscape like it might suddenly reveal the past. Alex, hands firm on the wheel, finally broke the silence. Why'd you stop talking about it, Walt, all these years? Walter didn't answer right away, because if I talked about it, I'd have to admit what I did, or didn't do. He stared out at the pines. Red wasn't just my friend. He was the kind of man who believed we could do some good over there, not in the fighting communism sense. He cared about the people, taught a kid in a village how to read, shared his rations with the locals, that kind of guy. What happened on that mission? Alex asked, quieter now. Walter ran a hand over his face. They told us it was a recon, simple in, simple out, but we ended up in a compound, medical, equipment, cages, not enemy-held, American. I saw things I still can't say out loud. Red did too. He wanted to report it, said we had to, but our CO said it was classified above our pay grade. The next morning, Red was gone. I didn't fight it. I didn't ask questions. I was scared. Alex kept his eyes on the road. You were a kid, same age as me now. Walter gave a dry laugh. No excuse. Cowardice is cowardice, no matter the age. They arrived at a gas station just before the trail to Wolf Creek turned to gravel. The place looked half abandoned. One pump, a sagging roof, and a flickering sign. Inside, they grabbed some supplies and coffee. As they were leaving, a man in a flannel jacket stepped out of a parked truck, smoking. He noticed Walter's tattoo and froze. His voice was hoarse. That's an ember mark, Walter nodded warily. You know it. My cousin came back from Nam different. He served under some hush-hush unit, said they had to erase one of their own. Buried him under paperwork. That. Sound familiar? Walter's grip tightened on his coffee. It does, the man's eyes narrowed. Then you know the truth never stayed buried, just frozen. Back in the car, Alex glanced at Walter. We getting close? Walter looked out at the falling snow. Yeah, and if Joe's still alive, he might be the only one who knows what happened after Red vanished. And far ahead, hidden deep in the woods, a cabin waited, along with a man who hadn't spoken to anyone in over 30 years. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees, its dark wood nearly blending into the snowy hillside. Smoke curled from a narrow chimney, and wind chimes made from bullet casings clinked softly in the breeze. Walter stepped out first, his boots crunching against the snow. He didn't knock. He just stood there, staring at the door, as if it might open on its own, but it didn't, not right away. Alex hung back, hand resting near the car. Finally, the door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall, wiry, eyes sharp as broken glass. His beard was thick and gray, and he held a rifle but not pointed at them, just resting in his hands. You're either real or ghosts, Joe Harmon said. Not sure which would hurt more. Walter nodded once. I'm real enough, and I've Got questions only you can answer. Joe stepped aside. Then come in, but don't expect tea and small talk. Inside, the cabin was sparse. Wood stove, a cot, shelves lined with ammo, books and dust. Joe moved with the stiffness of someone who had lived too long with pain and too little with company. Walter sat slowly. Red Ferris, you remember him? Joe scoffed. Red? You asking if I remember the one man who tried to blow the whistle while the rest of us stayed quiet? Alex tensed. He was my grandfather. Joe looked at him and something softened in his stare. You've got his jawline and his stubborn eyes. Walter leaned forward. We found a cipher, a message. He said he was being moved. That command turned on him. Joe's face darkened. They didn't just move him, they buried him. Not in the ground, said in red tape, sealed orders, black ink. He found out about the transport program. They were testing compounds on civilians. Red wanted it stopped. Alex's voice cracked. So, what happened? Joe stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old cassette recorder. This. He gave it to me before they took him, told me to keep it safe. I haven't played it in decades. He clicked it on, static. Then Red's voice, ghostly but clear. If you're hearing this, I didn't make it, they know. They're erasing us. Walt, Joe, if you're still alive, finish what I couldn't. Don't let them rewrite this. Alex's eyes were wet. Walter didn't blink. Joe turned off the tape. There it is, his last words, and now yours to carry. Outside, the wind howled louder, as if the ghosts were beginning to stir. The next morning, the cabin felt colder, quieter, like the air itself was holding its breath. Joe handed Walter a box before they left. Everything I saved. Documents, radio transcripts, mission logs they told us to burn. Thought maybe one. A day someone would come looking. Took long enough. Walter carried the box with both hands, like it was a casket. Back in town, Alex made a few calls. A buddy in military intelligence owed him a favor and agreed to meet at a neutral site, a storage facility near Bozeman. Inside the office, under flickering fluorescent lights, they laid out the documents like puzzle pieces. Pages stamped. Restricted. Reports signed with aliases, names buried in bureaucracy, but one folder hit like a punch to the gut. Walter Madsen, KIA, 1969. Alex blinked. You're dead? Walter stared at the paper. That's how they erased me. Said I died in the field. That's why no one ever followed up on what we saw. They buried me along with Red. Alex's jaw tightened. Then why are you still alive? Walter turned to him. Because Red lied. He dragged me back, told them I was dead, gave me a chance to vanish, said it was the only way I'd survive. Joe, who had joined them, spoke quietly. Red bought you time, and now it's time to repay him. They found another name in the documents, General Everett Sloan. He'd been a young lieutenant at the time of Operation Grey Ember, now retired, living in Virginia, still pulling strings through defense contractors. Walter's hands trembled. That man gave the orders. If anyone knows why Red disappeared, it's him. Alex looked between the two older men. We confront him, show him what we know. Joe didn't smile, but there was a flicker of approval in his eyes. Careful. Some men don't regret what they did. Some think burying the truth is patriotism. Walter straightened his back. Then we'll unbury it anyway. And in that moment, something in Walter shifted. Not just the weight of guilt, but the clarity of a mission finally made whole. The drive to Virginia was quieter than the last. No music, no casual questions, just the low hum of the highway and the pressure of what they were about to do. General Everett Sloan had retired with full honors, living out his days in a gated community near Alexandria. He was 83 now, suffering from advanced Parkinson's, but still lucid according to records. They got past the guard station with a forged military visitation form Joe had kept from his brief days in logistics. Some lies, he muttered. Jar worth the trouble. Sloan's house was pristine, brick facade, trimmed hedges, a flagpole out front. But the man who answered the door was smaller than Walter remembered. Thinner, pale, eyes dulled, but not unaware. Walter didn't wait for an invitation. "You know who I am," Sloane blinked. His lips twitched. "Madsen, I signed your death certificate." Alex stiffened beside him. "Then you know why we're here." Sloane let them in. The living room was filled with war memorabilia, medals, framed photos, a shadow box of pins, but none from Grey Ember. Walter sat across from him. "Red Ferris, you remember him?" Sloane nodded slowly. "The idealist. Wanted to play whistleblower, got himself erased." "He didn't disappear," Alex said, voice tight. "You made him disappear." Sloane's hand trembled as he poured tea. The war wasn't about truth, it was about containment. Red saw something he shouldn't have, wanted to bring it home. They said to silence him. I complied. Walter's eyes narrowed. "You knew we weren't coming back." Sloane looked at him, guilt flickering behind decades of practiced detachment. The mission was never survival, it was insurance, field testing, and if anyone lived, well, they'd be written off. Collateral. Joe, standing in the corner, pulled something from his coat, the cassette tape. He set it on the table. "He named you. He asked us to finish what he started." Sloane stared at the tape like it might bite him. "He was brave, braver than me. I was just trying to climb the ladder. Didn't realize how many bodies I'd have to step over." Walter leaned in. "So what now? You gonna deny it on your deathbed?" The general sighed. Then slowly, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a medal, a silver star, never awarded. "It was meant for Red," Sloane said. Before he spoke up, thought it might shut him up. "Never mailed it?" Alex took it in both hands like it was heavier than gold. "He deserves more than this." "You all do," Sloane whispered. "But I can't rewrite the war." Walter stood. "Maybe not, but we can make sure it's not forgotten." And with that, they left the house, not with vengeance, but with something closer to justice. It was a cold spring morning when they returned to the same roadside diner in Ohio. The sky was brighter now, the snow finally giving way to patches of thawing earth. Walter took his old booth near the window, but this time he didn't sit alone. Alex stood beside him, wearing his uniform. On the table between them sat the silver star, polished and encased, next to a framed photo of Red Ferris, young, red-haired, smiling under a humid jungle sky. The staff had cleared space, even the regulars noticed. "What's all this about?" asked the waitress, eyes flicking between them. Walter didn't hesitate. "A friend who never came home, and the truth we finally brought back with us." By noon, a small crowd had gathered. Some were veterans who'd heard through whispers. Others were locals moved by the flyers Alex had posted. A few brought candles. Someone printed Red's service photo and pinned it to the diner's bulletin board. Walter stood, cleared his throat, and began to speak. His voice cracked at first, then steadied. "There was a time when I thought silence was safer, that forgetting was part of surviving. But silence buried the wrong man, and it nearly buried me too. Red Ferris saved lives, and tried to save a little bit of our soul. He was branded a traitor, lost to paperwork. Today we give his name back." He handed the medal to Alex, who placed it gently on the table. Afterward, people came by, shook Walter's hand, thanked him, called him by name. Not sir or hey old man, Walter, Mr. Madsen, someone seen. As the sun dipped low, Walter looked around. The world hadn't changed, not really, but he had, and maybe that was enough. The past wasn't silent anymore. It was heard, held, honored, and Walter finally was no longer invisible. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without letting us know. Subscribe for more stories that matter, and tell us, where are you watching from? And what part of this journey moved you the most? We read every comment, and your voice means everything to this growing community.